Hello, I'm the Angry Spork, taking issue with Batman Huntress' Cry for Blood. Last time, Helena Bertinelli hid out in a Canadian cabin for 3 months with Richard Dragon, preparing herself physically and emotionally to regain focus of her life. The Question tagged along with her back to Gotham and got her backstory about training, studying, and bat inspiration that molded her into the Huntress. And just when she's ready to clear her name, she finds the Dark Knight waiting for her, and not a candygram in sight. Issue 5's cover sees Helena looking on in astonishment as Question holds up a pocket Batman fighting some equally teensy goons. Carrying your action figures around with you is a really good way to get them lost. Amateur move, dude. And now they must return to him. They were plant-sitting his ficus tree, and he wants to know why it looks overwatered. We pick up in the darkened room, Helena narrating why she's been gone for a quarter of the year, and how she didn't expect to find pointy ears in her apartment, asking where she's been. But this is Gotham, so why wouldn't she? All things considered, wouldn't she find it even more surprising and even more frightening if Batman wasn't there? A rather smarmy Vic Sage tries to be helpful, saying she was with him in a fun little exchange, when Helena finally speaks up that she didn't mean to shoot him back in issue 2. And of course he already knows that. The whole world's greatest detective thing aside, he's been shot at by enough people to know when it's intentional. She sinks into her chair, not wanting to fight him anymore, and doesn't know what she can do to convince him she didn't kill Claudio or that reporter. Fortunately, she doesn't have to. He's making a serious effort to trust her, which she doesn't make easy, but then again, neither does he. The only thing more unexpected than Batman in your apartment are the moments where he has bat self-awareness. So they go back to the drawing board. Someone that knows Huntress's identity has framed her, so he'll give her space to prove it. However, if she starts tussling with the police, he's bringing her down, which she understands. She might want to request an addendum on that part of the deal, considering how often Gotham cops are found to be on the take from the mob.
You didn't see nothing.
I don't know why people are always bad-mouthing the Mafia.
Bats is curious about Sage's involvement. Still looking for answers? It's not the answers that matter, it's the questions. But isn't asking questions to get answers how you learn? Or is it that some questions don't need answers to have impact? Have I answered my own questions with questions? Am I still speaking quizzically for the joke? Or is me brain am broken? Why are potato? Vic's helping Bertinelli learn to slow down, so she says. Forget conspiracies or her life as the Huntress. If anything's putting Helena 6 feet under, it's all her speeding tickets. And with that, the Caped Crusader takes off through the skylight, saying he'll be watching. Vic makes a joke about family being embarrassing, and she tells him to knock it off, saying she's not part of the Bats clan, he has 2 kids already, that she knows of, and starts talking about her fling with Nightwing, when Vic stops her on the grounds of too much information, unless she really wants to get into it. She doesn't, saying it's over with and was a mistake, bad for both of them. Which seems a little inconsistent from Nightwing Huntress. At the time, she seemed to view it as just a moment of 2 lonely people finding some momentary comfort with each other. For her, not necessarily a mistake, but not something she seems eager to revisit. Perhaps this change is just what happens when one writer references the work of another and uses some creative liberty, or it's an intentional sign that she reflected on that tryst and over time found it was maybe not the smartest move. She and Sage look like they're about to make out, but are interrupted by a tap at the window. Robin. And with that look, you gotta wonder if he timed this on purpose. Who are you? I'm at least twice your age, and I'm still trying to answer that. I've checked every pair of underwear I own, and I've narrowed my name down to either Haines or Fruit of the Loom. The Boy Wonder has brought over the notes he collected with Oracle, trying to pinpoint who might have uncovered her identity. Also for snacks, which kind of odd Helena told him where he could find chips since she just got back after 3 months. Either she bought those on the road and stashed them there in between the gutters after Bats left, or those things are less than fresh. Anyway, she's amazed, rather alarmed, at how many pictures of her relatives they've collected, but most of those were from the FBI, who'd done a great deal of surveillance of the mob in Gotham. And there are a couple that might even surprise her. That one spring break your great-aunt took to Cabo, for example. The feds are still trying to figure out how she smuggled so many Pomeranians, much less trained them to ride those ostriches. Having tracked her up to the time her cousin and uncle were convicted in Sicily, Robin is subtle in suggesting that those that trained her might be suspects, but they have the rock-solid alibi of having died in prison. A presumably short time later, Rob has joined Nightwing and Bats on the roof across the street, relaying Huntress's thanks for the documents and adding he didn't tell her something. Grayson wants to talk to her, at least to inform her of this dude watching her place, but Batman's promise to let her work the case her own way extends to his allies as well, trusting her not to put any more bodies in the ground, though Wing figures expecting her to keep that promise will break his heart. You mean like when she had the opportunity to kill a mobster during your crossover with her, and she didn't? Anything like that? Or are you still steamed she didn't share her dinner with you 3 months back? In her apartment, Helena's opened an invitation to her cousin Monica's wedding this weekend, which, considering issue 1, was probably not her idea, and she also sees a notice of her termination from Gotham Public Schools, given her long absence and no contact. But she chucks the letter in the trash, without much of a reaction to it. Vic asks what happened after she first saw Batman go all action movie fight scene on her extended family, and she humors him. Returning to her Swiss boarding school, she started plotting revenge, sketched costume ideas. She knew the enemy and how to fight them, but also knew she was not yet ready. Eventually returning to the house in Sicily, abandoned after her aunt had moved out, she heads into the barn's cellar, finding a handheld crossbow and some priestly vestments among the garments, which became the basis for her then-current costume. She enrolled in the University of Palermo, made thorough use of their Department of Mafia Studies, including looking up those connected to Boss Mandragora, and likened her devotion to her quest to that of a nun. Maybe Batman would be more accepting of her methods if her chosen weapon was instead a yardstick. She continued working, studying, failing to be patient, seeing her family's deaths in her sleep, but dreaming of revenge in her waking hours, forging her unique arsenal until she'd had enough waiting and returned to Gotham to become the Huntress. She did eventually find those responsible for the deaths of her parents and brother, the killer himself and Mandragora, who hired him, both now dead, but neither could answer why she was left alive. Helena recalls Vic mentioning someone that wasn't Batman watching her apartment, and he goes out to see if that's still the case. And sure enough, the guy is still in the alley, now interrogated by the question as to why he's been watching Bertinelli's apartment. Who? Playing dumb can get you hurt. Whereas actually being dumb tends to hurt other people. Turns out the Snoop is a private investigator, hired to watch the building to see if the dame in the picture he has showed up. Each night for the past 3 months, he's called a number and reports to someone that never gave a name. Verifying the man's license, Question demands the number he was instructed to call. He returns to Helena, exuding smoke that lets him take off his mask, and lets her know about the PI, and how, in between pages, he passed the number along to an associate of his that found it was registered to Mario Casamento. But she's a bit busy being dumbstruck at one of the FBI's photos, which he figures is of her parents, even remarking how she resembles her mom. But Helena has already left. Where will you be during your investigation into your family's horrific murder when your laxative kicks in? She's suited up, really quickly considering everything she's sporting, and tells Vic not to follow her as she dashes out the window. At the Casamento compound, Mario is checking in with his dad, who was looking at a photo of a very familiar woman, to say he's headed out to supervise a shipment coming in tonight. With Harbor Patrol and a couple of cops paid off, and Batman reportedly busy elsewhere, it should be safe and easy. Santos suggests the Huntress is still on the loose, but Mario is confident that, with her gone for months, she's likely dead in a ditch. He asks if there's a message for Old Man Panessa, and he's told to show respect for someone who was a man of valor way back when. Mario disagrees, insisting he owes no thanks or respect to him, and Tommaso's day ended with Franco Bertinelli's death, criticizing his dad for living in the past. And that makes Pappy get slappy again. Mario leaves in a huff, saying not to wait up for him, and when the door closes, Santo turns around to find Huntress aiming her crossbow at him. Look at the photograph, please. Every time I do it makes me laugh. Wait, no, Dang it! I don't even listen to Nickelback. How'd that get stuck in my head? It really hurts the vibe I'm going for. The picture is of Maria Bertinelli, but with Don Casamento, and the mobster figures it must have been the feds, since Franco would have killed him if he'd known about their affair. Huntress demands answers, and the Don says it's obvious. They were in the process of conceiving her, and tells Helena Rosa to put down her weapon before she accidentally murders her father. Negligent fratricide. You know, I accidentally shot Batman already, so this wouldn't bother me quite as much. Wait, would that just validate Question's theory about bats being my parental figure? Dang it, now I'm conflicted again. Issue 6 has a very Huntress-themed look, purple text and black background, as a body lays on the floor, and the title Vigilante standing in a beam of light. And so, at last, she has her revenge. And apparently Montgomery Scott is her accomplice, beaming her away from the scene of the crime. Huntress is standing there, only able to think of the story Question told her back in issue 2, about the man who dreamed he was a butterfly, how he forged fragile identities out of glass, but pretend they're made of iron. I am Helena Bertinelli, last of my family, last of the Mohicans, the last airbender, last to be picked for dodgeball. I am the Huntress, and my blood cries for blood. A phrase that can also be useful as a very dramatic way to ask for a transfusion. I am a butterfly.
It was the butterfly, I tell you. The butterfly!
He's crazy, boys. Get the taser.
Don Casamento pours himself a drink, saying that though Helena looks more like her mom, her eyes resembled his. So Maria said, anyway. Franco Bertinelli could tell this wasn't his child, and turns out he was also an abusive monster, even before Maria cheated on him, hitting her in the body, avoiding the face, to hide the bruises from her older brother Tommaso, who had a notorious temper. Huntress doesn't believe him, but the Don insists that not liking what she's hearing doesn't make him a liar. Tell that to people on Twitter who use misinformed memes to make their imaginary point. She's the one who brought the photo and demanded an explanation, so he gave her one. He even distinctly remembered that night it was taken, thinking they'd been so careful that nobody knew about them, but the FBI must have been watching Maria as well as Franco. How scared they were to be found out, the scent of her skin, and that's when she smacks the picture from his hand, telling him to shut up or she'll kill him.
I'm going to go ahead and give you a pass because you have murder eyes.
Kind of understandable. No one wants to hear about their parents' sex life. Santos sips his drink, unfazed, since if she gets accused of another death, she'd almost immediately be arrested and unmasked. That's when it clicks. Santo killed Claudio and the journalist, framing Helena after discovering she was the Huntress, because the dates matched. I'm guessing he means her appearance in Gotham after Helena returned. I can't really think of what else it could mean. Also that Tommaso mentioned she was living with the Asaros for a time, which made it all make more sense. Killing her civilian identity would be too hollow, but he can use the Huntress to destroy her, because she's a mistake, one whose sight disgusts him, one that lives while Maria is now only dust. And Bones, don't forget Bones. It's only been 15 years after all. While Boss Mandragora ordered the hit on the Bertinelli line, no one left to seek a vendetta, it was Casamento who arranged it, giving him an opportunity to take Maria for himself. He passed the orders along, just modified, telling the hired gun to spare the sister. However, he met Tommaso's sister, whose death would enrage the Panessas, but the assassin interpreted it as sparing young Helena. My mistake. Just like you. Yeah, I bet the woman you wanted would have been just thrilled that you wanted the daughter she had with you shot in the head. That'd make for the most charming honeymoon conversation, I'm sure. Side note, Helena, if you want to borrow this for 10 or 15 minutes, feel free. Now she's so much more than his blood. She has no choice but to guard his drug shipments or take out his enemies if he so commands. He tells her to leave and expect to hear from him soon, while walking away. She takes aim with her crossbow, but finds she can't do it. She later stands on a rooftop dramatically, standard coping mechanism for Gotham crime fighters, and can tell when Nightwing arrives, who confirms what she suspects. The Bat family already knew she was Casamento's daughter, after Pointieres ran their DNA, and that he framed her. I mean, better Bats doing the tests than Maury Povich, right? Wing reaffirms that the Bats will stay out of the matter, and that he trusts her to resolve it the right way. So she swings off, telling him thanks for nothing. And suddenly it feels like she's having second thoughts about all that omerta she was talking about in the earlier chapters. She returns to her apartment, where Vic is meditating shirtless, and she tries to remember Richard Dragon's advice about breathing. She blows out a candle, the two get closer, and, well...
I had snoo-snoo.
Sometime later, they're talking over some Chinese food. Since there's no evidence that Casamento framed her, even if she could put him away, he would let her secret out, and Helena would spend the rest of her days running, if not outright killed. Her whole life trying to take down the mob, and now she may be forced to serve it. Then she sees the invitation to her cousin Monica's wedding, and asks Vic if he owns a suit. Are we talking traditional, or Starfleet diplomatic uniform? Because I actually have both. Fast forward to the reception, the cake being cut, and Helena pointing Vic in the direction of a line outside a door to her Uncle Tommaso's office. They all want favors from him. As per Sicilian tradition, no father can refuse a request on his daughter's wedding day. What about stuff he's really unlikely or realistically unable to say yes to, like end organized crime, or divide by zero, or say with a straight face that Tynion is a good writer? Actually, from what I've looked up, this isn't really a thing, the father of the bride doing whatever is asked of him. Maybe there's some historical truth in there somewhere, but obviously the part of never refusing a request opens itself to a lot of ridiculous notions. The two are spotted by Santo next to his son Mario, who, we're reminded, helped Tommaso bring heroin into Gotham, though it's Mario who does the dirty work. Helena intends to pay respect to her uncle and make a request. She meets with him, clarifies her date is just a friend, and that what she asks is for the memory of her mother. He promises to do what she asks, if it's in his power. She whispers in his ear, and a grim look falls on his face. For us, I will do this. I will revive from cancellation this animated television series, Symbionic Titan. You know, you made your request. Maybe Vic could have one and try that stop all the mob stuff I mentioned a moment ago. Then you win twice. Obviously, that doesn't happen, since they're about to leave when Santos stops them, insisting she honor her uncle's oldest friend with a kiss. Obviously the on-the-cheek variety, which involves this dead-eyed stare before they part ways, and Mario left rather confused. Later, Huntress makes her return to the streets, catching Mario leaving a nightclub, with the Question tagging along to see how everything ends, and changing coats for the occasion.
Get me my blue windbreaker!
She stops Mario from leaving, demanding to know when the next shipment of product is due. Motivated by her bolt to his neck, he tells her just a few hours from now, 2 a.m., so she lets him leave, specifically ordering him to leave the city immediately, or he becomes her new pincushion. No goodbyes, no stops, no speaking to anyone. No stopping for McDonald's, no visiting puppies at the pet store, no bumming free samples at the supermarket. You'll have to pass go, but you better not collect $200 or so help me! With him running for his life, Helena's plan is in motion with no turning back. She eventually gets a call from Santo at her home about how, with Mario's disappearance, he has to oversee the shipment at the docks, so expects Huntress to be there in case this is some game of hers involving the police or the Bat. All this right in the middle of her knife sharpening. I tell you, if I had a nickel. She tells Vic not to follow her, and confirms that was her biological father on the phone. Sage says he doesn't really know her, meaning her caped identity, still expecting her to be a killer, but she responds Casamento does. He just doesn't know Helena. For example, I like pineapple on pizza. You know, maybe that's the real reason Batman doesn't trust me. Later at the docks, Huntress meets Santo, who tells her to take position to cover him. She refuses to kill for him, but he tells her never say never, as he walks inside Pier 18. Helena proceeds to disrobe to her civvies underneath and toss her costume into the river, save for the cross from her cape. She's not the only one ignoring instruction, as the Question arrives, telling her there's still time, but she simply repeats blood cries for blood, reminding whose sister it was Santo killed. He asks where it ends, when it's enough, and there are 2 cracks of gunfire inside the building. Now, Helena says, it's enough. Unless a writer, some years later, gets really desperate to revisit this story and retcons that Santo fell into a convenient Lazarus pit that Ra's al Ghul just coincidentally left at the pier. Sirens are heard in the distance, police closing in thanks to an anonymous tip, ensuring that her Uncle Tommaso will do time. Vic uses the smoke to remove his mask in order to damn Helena to her face.
D. Damnation. E. Eternal damnation.
But she says that happened a long time ago. as the comic ends on her having dropped her cross in the river. That was Batman Huntress, and it was enjoyable as a mystery with twists, surprises for the main character, and some context for her personal crusade. Kind of lacking in the alleged co-star, though, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, given the oversaturation of the Dark Knight of late. Honestly, I think it uses him and his allies just enough, to the right capacity, playing out the distrust or compassion each might have for Huntress and how those might conflict with each other. But it still works as a crossover when she studies under Richard Dragon and gets assistance from The Question. It is a very Huntress-focused story, and while giving her soul billing might have sold some issues, one imagines adding the Bat's name was done to ensure better numbers, and probably an improvement over calling it Huntress/The Question, though that would have been appropriate. Not just because of Vic Sage, but that the story was motivated by the question of why Helena was the sole survivor of her family's tragedy. Though I guess in that case you could just replace the slash with a colon. I'm not aware of how much of her post-crisis history was revealed to readers before this, though I wouldn't be surprised if there's some retconning going on, like her being the child of an affair, which I think was nicely hinted at in the second issue, even though the whole protagonist is actually the antagonist's child thing is kind of played out. In any case, I can't really say if it's better or worse. It could be that not much attention was paid to her backstory to begin with, and it was the matter of various writers working off each other over the years. While never having been a big fan of Huntress myself, I'll admit she was very compelling here. She's used to being alone, outcast, unwanted, and is comfortable doing things her own way. There's even a cultural element here, made all too apparent with enough references to Omerta to make a drinking game potentially lethal. Her stubbornness from the distrust from others, as well as some bad luck with that bolt, all culminate in a situation she can't handle like usual, which brings the question into play. They never do get into specifics about how she got on his radar, or why he decided she needed Richard Dragon's tutelage. The most we get is that he saw her on a path not unlike one he took, and that he likes her, and perhaps that's enough. Some people leave anonymous love letters to their crush. Vic Sage leaves them in the Canadian wilderness for 3 months for Kung Fu Zen training. They have a tryst as well, a bit similar to what Helena had with Grayson, but this one could be viewed as more tragic. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment one-night stand. They really did seem to grow closer to each other, enjoy each other's company, and she counteracts any potential future of that by having her dad killed. This might be confusing to some readers, like myself, unaware of Question's formal stance on offing one's enemies, other than it being a standard no-no for most heroes. That training she went through was likely meant to help her get over that cry for blood she was hearing and find another path that didn't indulge in the very kind of murder the mob does on the regular. What could have been a real relationship, the kind she couldn't have and didn't really want with Nightwing, fizzles out because of what could be viewed as her returning to self-destructive tendencies. A superhero who is the victim of their own bad decision-making? Oh, you do go on. The story felt very well paced, with flashbacks that help us get into Huntress's state of mind as she grew up. Granted, her narration did much of it, but the art did a great job with her expressions, from the excellent use of just a few lines to show her blissfulness eating with her family, who all looked dour by comparison, even her brother Pino, who looked like he either knew the family business or at least Dad's penchant for spousal abuse, to world-shattering despair and confusion when the assassin strikes, maintaining some composure at the Asaro farm, though still clearly distraught, and going from surprised to determined when she selects her weapon. This is the preferable means by which you convey a complex variety of emotions in a narrative, unlike some stories I could name. Really good job on the artist's part, even if sometimes they do draw her necklace like it was embedded in her skin. Whether the church would count that as devotion or not, I don't think she's all that committed to the faith. Indeed, bringing me to another point on how her religion played into the story. Or didn't. In Catholicism, of which Helena has traditionally been a part of, and was the inspiration for her costume, the kind of scarf-like garment hanging over a priest's shoulders is called a stole, and can be different colors depending on a few factors. Purple is worn during Advent and Lent, or when the priest is hearing confession, as it represents sorrow, which for her is kind of obvious, and penitence, which may be a bit more complicated here. She's acting out of vengeance, which is very far removed from penitence, so perhaps she sees herself as penitence for those she fights, knowing the sins of the Mafia even if they don't officially confess them, and inflicting a form of penance upon them since they seem uninterested in seeking it out themselves. I'm no biblical scholar, so that's just my guess. And even if true, it'd just be her misinterpreting Christ's teachings and religious doctrine to rationalize and justify and perhaps distract from her own actions. However, I cannot speak to any religious significance of her more revealing costume from Batman vs. Predator 2. She also tosses her suit like she's abandoning the identity, though she'd return to it in a new look, as well as the cross, like she's also abandoning her faith. But it never seemed all that prevalent to her. Not here, nor in previous stories I've read with her, have I seen her do much to practice Catholicism. Not that I can recall, so maybe there are some minor things in, say, No Man's Land or something that's slipping my mind. But in fairness, she wasn't exactly popping up a lot in books I was getting. Basically, it feels like the times where panels were particularly focused on her cross were intended to be religiously significant, but unless I missed something, I didn't feel like it was very well established by the end. There could be something about her wearing all purple civilian garb at the docks relating to how Christ was mocked by soldiers who threw a purple robe on him, purple being considered reserved for royalty at the time, and they were deriding him as King of the Jews. Or perhaps her cross being a little upside down as it sank, maybe relating to when Peter was crucified and he insisted on it being done upside down because he didn't feel it appropriate to die the same way as our Lord and Savior. But that's probably some far reaching on my part. There were a couple of hiccups, I thought, like Santo merely mentioning dates matching that confirmed Helena was the Huntress, which sounded pretty vague, but was more or less saved by the Asaro connection. While there are a few hints to the big parental reveal, I wonder if there was some foreshadowing in issue 1, with Monica not seeing Helena as a Bertinelli, saying they all died years ago. There's no context for why she would feel this way on an emotional level, like if Helena slighted or insulted her somehow, or broke some tradition, so it makes one wonder if Monica somehow knew Don Casamento was really her dad and kept it to herself. I very much liked the art, smooth colors, nice use of shadows for appropriate moods, and while the flashbacks had a lot of negative space, you could just see them as amorphous gutters, helping to distinguish them from present-day panels. There are many subtle, quiet moments that can say a lot on their own too, like the night Cousin Sal takes Helena underneath the barn, and she leaves her bear behind, something she had clung to for several years at that point, a sign that a superficial source of comfort wasn't enough to help her anymore, that she needed to find a better way to fight her nightmares, ending her childhood naivete, by trading a plush toy for a long-range weapon. At least that seems to be the most obvious interpretation I can see. And a typo I noticed at the last minute, Santo, as he's called in later issues, is called Santa Casamento in issue 1. Either those pronunciations are supposed to be interchangeable, or Christmas is very different for the 5 families. It's pretty light on the Caped Crusader, and it might perpetuate some cultural inaccuracies, like Sicilian wedding favors, yet Batman Huntress is still a good story, if with some head-scratchers if you want to nitpick, but no real deal-breaking problems. It gives its star a chance at finding a way out of a cycle of madness, only to succumb to that call to pay back a grave injustice. A flawed character that finds her identity in flux, but in the end doesn't seem to hold any illusions about herself. I'm the Angry Spork, and man have I got issues.